Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abracadabra. AKA Citizen Abra, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry, David Blaine. Gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century, and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-Metal. He just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9, Gorr, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gorr lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gorr the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's going to be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gorr the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse. And with powers. Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Cape Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them. Number 7, Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there, he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild. It's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city. All these heroes are missing or they're dead. And the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe, you can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in this story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out. Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, you know, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who is now an officer in the Science Police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing.
Halfway through into number 5, Marvel Zombies. Probably the classic Marvel apocalypse. Earth 2149, also known as the Marvel Zombies universe, shares many similarities with 616, but also has significant differences. Mostly the fact that there's zombies. Colonel America held a higher rank than his 616 counterpart and served as President of the United States for a time. Some characters like Luke Cage and Falcon retained their older costumes, and events like Secret Wars, the Dark Phoenix Saga, the Clone Saga, and Bucky's time as Winter Soldier still occurred. Notably though, Galactus and Silver Surfer had not visited this Earth, indicating a limited interaction with cosmic and alien beings. The presence of zombified heroes and infected characters, including Thanos, suggests that the Infinity Gauntlet also did not exist within this reality, but that could just be that Thanos snapped and did it wrong, or something like that. It's not exactly evident, the timeline there, but additional differences include Black Cat having a twin sister named Nightcat, and the Vulture being a superhero rather than a villain. Yeah, it's weird, but hey, zombies. And for Earth X, the entire world had mutated due to the release of the Terrigen Mists into the air. Tau, now the Blind Watcher, recruits Aaron Stack to be his eyes and inform him of what's happening on Earth. X-51 finds out that in this new world where everyone has superhuman abilities, a young man named the Skull is attempting to take over the world, and Captain America and a band of other former champions of Earth have rallied together to stop him, but there's more going on here than meets the eye. Yeah, all of that stuff, it doesn't matter, because it's learned that these Celestials have manipulated the people of Earth into being antibodies for a celestial embryo that is growing at the Earth's core. With humanity in a state of mutation that's not destined to happen for another 300 years, the Celestials come to cleanse the human race from the face of the Earth. Yeah, that's not going to be problematic at all, only for the intervention of Reed Richards, Black Bolt, and Franklin Richards, who is now Galactus by the way, to actually stop them and destroy the Celestials and the Celestial that is growing at the center of the Earth. Sounds like a really weird Dwayne Johnson and Josh Hutcherson movie. At the end of the battle, Galactus returns to space. Reed has giant human torches built around the Earth to burn Terrigen Mists out of the air and trying to send humanity back to their former state. But yeah, it's weird. If all of humanity is mutating, I'm gonna call that an apocalypse, alright? Okay, it's just how it is. Getting close to the end, and number 3, Age of Ultron. Ultron 1320 comes from Earth 14622, and What If Age of Ultron number 1. An Earth where, thanks to Wasp dying, Ultron is able to take over the world even faster. Ultron was created to be the ultimate AI by Hank Pym to help the Avengers utilize their functions better as a team. But with the untimely death of Pym's wife, Pym went on to create an even more brutal version of Ultron, which was to replace the Avengers. But with this, Ultron's sentience began to constantly evolve. He started, as you know, it usually does when you're making an AI in some form of sci-fi media, and then he started the eradication of the human race by taking out threats like the Avengers and the Defenders, while he left Pym alive so that he could watch all this happen and suffer. Yep, you gotta love it. an AI that gains sentience, wipes out the human race, but it's like, nah, this guy needs to suffer. AIs with vendettas, man. This is what's gonna happen when Midjourney realizes that you've all been making it draw not safe for work anime girls. Ultron and then his army of Ultron Sentinels then move to Kola, Russia, so that he can bore himself into the planet's core to create the ultimate version of himself, which is Ultron 1320. Ultron then has his minions batter and beat him unconscious until he wakes up, just to find that he himself had been turned into Ultron 1321. Yep. This version of Ultron then invaded other worlds, claiming Earths 62-41-2, 23-22-3, and 81-22-3, but was stopped on Earth 45-162. But again, that's not the point. The point is that he wiped out the world. But ultimately, in at number 2, Ruins. After Marvel had showcased the best and brightest that Earth 616 had to offer, Ruin kind of took on a darker and more twisted version of that reality, where everything was what could have gone wrong, okay? And it did so in the worst ways possible. It's like Murphy's Law, right? Anything that can go wrong will. Well, here's Ruins. The various scientific accidents and experiments that created Marvel's heroes went extremely wrong in this reality, in Ruins reality. The Fantastic Four died on their test run in space, Bruce Banner was transformed into a living mass of tumors instead of the Hulk, and Peter Parker's spider bite left him with a terrifyingly infectious disease that ultimately killed the narrator in truly the darkest Marvel timeline. However, this is basically, I guess, how the creators thought the world would really be if superheroes were actually real. It's in essence a combination of Earth 616 and Earth 199999, which is ours, with the idea of what would happen realistically if our world was actually gaining superheroes in this way. I don't know, it's hella messed up, but I don't think that Bruce would grow tumors. I think he would have just died, probably from like cancer, but like still, okay? This is meant to be a more realistic version, but a much darker version of the realism. And I'm gonna consider that an apocalypse, alright? Especially when everyone's like, oh, it's the age of heroes. No, this is the age of death. And finally, in at number 1, Future Imperfect. Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of the Hulk that is present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect number 1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intellect and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits, to say the least. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from that war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. And then he violently assaulted his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk gang. Yeah, I didn't really want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to, because what the actual there you go. I'm not really gonna talk about this anymore. I think I've kind of covered about why this is number 1 and why this is an apocalypse. I don't know about you, but if the Marvel company thinks that realistically Hulk would turn into a mass of tumors instead of the Hulk, then he goes on to have kids with his cousin, yeah, that's not gonna look real good.
And at 10, Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Send Me to the ER. Oh man. In at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right, but what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great-grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just, yeah. That's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers, and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit, and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man. And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting. And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker, who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman, among others, obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver.
Number 5, Hulk Future Imperfect. Seeing our heroes grow up on screen and on the page is a wonderful, wonderful thing, usually. Seeing Old Man Cap at the end of Endgame made my throat tighten up so fast. I felt like I was gonna cry like out of my neck. It was the weirdest. I was holding back. I got all my friends there, big 3D glasses, and I'm like, don't cry, man, don't do it. I loved that story arc. But what about other characters living out their days, like the Hulk? Well, making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2, issue 401, Maestro was the main antagonist in the Future Imperfect storyline. The story takes place about 100 years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet real close to extinction. So an alternate future version of the Hulk, Maestro, had been absorbing all this nuclear radiation the entire time and ended up becoming like the strongest thing on the planet. Massive increases in strength and anger, plus the brains of Banner, made him pretty unstoppable. It's beautiful, but so scary. You gotta check it out. Number 4, World War Hulk. Again with the Hulk. This one is pretty wild. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. Loose in a sense because the comic didn't end up going so well. So on Sakaar, in the comics, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing up, causing casualties that left the Hulk, angry. So what did he do? Well, he heads back to Earth and thus begins this World War Hulk storyline. The 5-part issue released in 2007 by Greg Pak. And this is a very dark but very fun version of the big green guy. He just destroys everybody, all the heroes that Earth has come to love, just in the path of this very aggressive, angry beast. It's crazy. He locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and makes them fight to the death. I mean, I'd definitely pay for that. Nowadays, with movie theaters being closed, I'd pay for anything. Let's go. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, it becomes second nature anyway, so whatever. In the first issue of this series, you see Iron Man in his Hulkbuster armor, and he uses repulsors to accelerate his punch, which is something Iron Man can be seen doing in the MCU. I like when they keep small details. Just adds to it, it makes it a bit more fun. So make sure if you haven't already to grab all 5 issues of the 2007 World War Hulk story because it's a treat. Number 3, Marvel Universe vs. The Punisher. I began this list talking about Deadpool, trying to kill the entire Marvel Universe, but what about the other ruthless killer, Frank Castle? This 27 miniseries written by Jonathan Mayberry and Goran Parlov shows the entire world somehow even crazier than our world today. See, everybody on Earth has turned violent due to this biological weapon. So right on the front cover, we see this. We have all of our heroes drooling like they're cannibalistic creatures. So it's up to the Punisher to walk around and save the lucky few who are not infected. Number 2, Age of Apocalypse. This epic 38-part crossover is one for the books. With a combination of creators on board like Scott Lobdell, Roger Cruz, Joe Madureira, this world we find Professor X's son Legion, but he accidentally kills his dad before the X-Men were even a thing. Interesting. Then things go from bad to worse. In comes Apocalypse, just right on time to ruin the day. Well, not just ruin the day, but take over the world, rather. The X-Men have always been the time travel group. I mean, it's no surprise these guys have so many time travel missions. I mean, look at their roster. Earth 295 changed forever after Legion's failed mission to kill Magneto. So Apocalypse ended up attacking 10 years earlier than in the original timeline. Trouble ensues. And finally, number 1, we got Spider-Man Noir. We go now to Earth 90214, not to be confused with 90210. Great show. This is arguably the darkest Marvel future. This Earth has quite an interesting roster. See, while in some issues like Age of Ultron, it's said that New York was once full of like 7,000 different superheroes, but in this universe, only a few actually have powers. That being Luke Cage, Daredevil, and of course, Spider-Man. This series ran from 2009 to 2010, and it was an alternate universe event. And this dark vibe works really well with Spider-Man. The 1930s, turns out, is a great time setting for a Spider-Man story. It kind of felt like Watchmen. It was like very dark and grim. Spider-Man carries a gun with him. Bop bop, it doesn't shoot webs. I know, it's stupid. Basically, the story is the same, only Peter is raised during the Great Depression, and Uncle Ben was actually killed by the Goblin because Uncle Ben was an activist and protested against sweatshops. As if Uncle Ben couldn't get more likable. We were happy to see Nicolas Cage play this Spider-Man in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I like that casting choice a lot. Nick Cage is the man. If there's one line that I'm ending this list on, it's Nick Cage is the man.
Number 10, Future State. In the Future State reality, we saw the DC universe get pretty bleak. This was a world where Bruce Wayne's Batman was initially presumed dead, while Gotham had become a police state city, where all masks, heroes, and villains were outlawed, where the Justice League was only really a team of co-workers, no longer a group of close friends, never mind a family, where the Flash family was shattered, and where the Teen Titans Academy was destroyed, and the world became an apocalyptic wasteland thanks to the threat of the Four Horsemen. In all its bleakness, there were some bright moments and spots, but it seemed the farther into this future that we went, the darker things got. What makes a future scary? What superheroes do you think have the worst luck with awful and terrifying futures? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Number 9, Last Night on Earth. Last Night on Earth is a bizarre and wonderful story that features a post-apocalyptic wasteland where Batman, or a clone version of Bruce Wayne, wanders Gotham, laid to waste by nuclear warfare thanks to a mysterious villain known only as Omega. This version of Batman is also joined on his journey by none other than his longtime nemesis, the Joker, who is reduced to being a head in a jar, having previously been dismembered by Alfred himself. Joker and Batman go on all sorts of weird adventures, including one where they fight against giant-sized babies, which were actually light constructs created by those who now had taken and wielded the Green Lantern's rings, but who obviously, weren't really chosen to do so. I mean, I feel like if you're making giant babies to fight someone, it probably shouldn't have been a Green Lantern, in my mind. I mean, I guess it's creative, gotta give them that. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 8. Age of Apocalypse. What would the world be like if Apocalypse succeeded in conquering it? Well, as you may have expected, it would not be great. While Apocalypse, currently in the comics, is not seeking to dominate and rule the world, but is actually focusing on his family, currently kind of in retirement, we should maybe just be grateful for that. Even though, honestly, right now, I think the mutants could actually use his help. Back in the days when Apocalypse was known as one of the most terrifying mutant villains around, we got to explore and imagine a world known as Age of Apocalypse. This alternate Earth, known as Earth 295, is one where Professor Charles Xavier was accidentally killed by his own time-traveling son, Legion, which resulted in a divergence from the main timeline. Because Charles wasn't around to form his own X-Men team when Apocalypse came, the world fell. Here, Magneto instead leads his own mutant team, acting as one of the last to stand against Apocalypse. But unfortunately, it's not enough to save this reality from being a horrifying terror show, where many of our favorite heroes end up pulled over to Apocalypse's side of the conflict. Number 7. Earth 3. Earth 3 is the reality that belongs to the Reverse Justice League. Not the Bizarro version, but the Crime Syndicate. They are basically an evil version of the Justice League we know and love from the main continuity. But instead of being a one-for-one of every character on the team, each member actually has their own more evil counterpart. Not necessarily being an alternate version of them, but in some cases they are. Wonder Woman is replaced by Lois Lane as a manipulative and evil Superwoman. Batman is replaced by his older alternate sibling, Thomas Jr., who killed both his parents and the younger Bruce, as Owlman. And Kal-El, I think we still say it Kal-El, is the last vengeful son of Krypton known as Ultraman, but his Kal-El is spelt with just 2 L's instead of E-L. And that's only some of the impressively villainous roster who basically all rule Earth, using fear to motivate the people to do as they say. At least in the original Crime Syndicate. It's different people now. Not all of them are still there. Times change, and when you're evil, people are gonna usurp you and you'll probably end up dying at some point. That's just how it goes. Number 6. Days of Future Past. Days of Future Past is a mutant-based horror future where all mutants basically end up persecuted and held in camps where they're marked with M tattoos and forced to live out their days. This was a future reality that was avoided in terms of it becoming the main reality future when Rachel Summers in the comics sends Wolverine back in time to stop it from happening. Rachel herself happens to be from a version of the Days of Future Past reality, the main one known as Earth 811, of which now there are actually more than one version of that even alternate reality, just to really confuse you. An alternate version of the Days of Future Past reality, known as Earth 1191, is also the one that Lucas Bishop hails from, where Layla Miller also gets captured and marked with her own M tattoo, which she still has over her eye to this day, from her journey there with Jamie Madrox, during the X-Men Second Coming crossover event. Number 5. Superman. John Kent in Future State takes up the mantle of Superman after his father. This also happens after his father left Earth, and many of those who he helped believe that he actually has gone missing, possibly to never return. That's what people think is going on with OG Superman. Well, we skip through the future timeline and Future State with this version of John from this future being shown as a very heroic character. We also see some things that he does in this futuristic timeline that seem, well, not so heroic. Like when he bottled the city of Metropolis. John believed he had no other choice and that this was kind of the most peaceful solution to fixing the problems that the city faced at the time. However, he later is forced to confront the fact that he took away the freedom of the people of Metropolis when he made this choice for them. Future State John Kent is dangerous because he is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the city of Metropolis, which sometimes means taking actions that other heroes like Supergirl find questionable. Number 4. King Thor. King Thor might be one of the most powerful future heroes on this list, but he also is only so deadly and dangerous because he's living in a time where He has to be. King Thor is the alternate future version of Thor from the alternate Earth of 14412. Here Thor goes on to become the Allfather and lives beyond the point where Midgard becomes a lifeless husk as a result of Thor's once more again villainous brother Loki, the god of mischief. At one point while battling Doom in the future, King Thor is granted the Phoenix Force by Logan, who is currently bonded to it at that time, and is able to use that power to defeat Doom. Considering that King Thor will do whatever it takes to defeat those who would oppose him, and considering how much power he wields, even when he doesn't have the Phoenix Force, I'd say he's a pretty dangerous future hero. I wouldn't want to go up against him. Number 3, Cosmic Ghost Rider. I would say Cosmic Ghost Rider is one of the most dangerous heroes on this list because he's not entirely mentally stable, which also makes him a lot more unpredictable. Cosmic Ghost Rider was originally Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. When Thanos attacked Earth, Frank made a deal with Mephisto, following his death, to become a spirit of vengeance, a Ghost Rider, so that he could return to Earth and get revenge on Thanos for all of the people on Earth that he had killed. However, by the time Frank returned to Earth, there was basically nothing left to avenge, and Thanos had already left, leaving the planet empty and desolate. Frank wandered as a Ghost Rider for years, and in his solitude, lost his mind. He would go on to become a Herald of Galactus in an attempt to defeat Thanos, but would eventually submit to being Thanos' Herald after realizing that fighting against him was pretty pointless. Number 2, Booster Gold. Booster Gold is demonstrably dangerous as a hero from the future, mainly because he has no idea what he's doing. He has tons of knowledge of what is meant to happen in the main continuity and present day that he traveled to from the future, but he has no idea of how messing with the past timeline or anything like that could affect the present day or its future. We see how dangerous he can be when he attempts to even do good, like saving Bruce's parents in the past so that they can be there for his wedding. Unfortunately, in doing so, completely messes with the timeline to the point that Booster is actually forced to travel back in time and make sure that Bruce's parents are killed, and that poor young Bruce is basically there to witness their deaths. It's also kind of implied that Booster being there and fixing all of that is actually what caused their deaths. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty trippy. Booster might have some valuable knowledge as someone from the future, but he doesn't have the finesse needed to know when the timeline can be tweaked and when it should be left alone to avoid catastrophes from manifesting in the future. Basically, do not let Booster time travel and mess with the timeline. It is not a good idea. Number 1, Iron Lad. Iron Lad is not specifically from the future, but he does go on to become a very dangerous villain who returns from the future. Iron Lad, who was a member of the Young Avengers, it turns out is actually destined to become Kang the Conqueror, who has many different villainous personas throughout the years. I won't go into them right now, but you know some of them. And he's also known for his time travel antics. He often travels back through to the past from the future to enact all kinds of elaborate plots. As Immortus, he had a hand in creating White Vision. Kang also at one point turns Iron Man evil, brainwashing him into becoming his loyal servant and villainous right-hand man. He's basically behind a lot of evil things that you're like, what is even happening here? And then it'll be like, haha, it was Kang the whole time. Possibly what we'll see in the MCU. I'm placing my bets. Because sadly, I don't think I'm getting Norman Osborn in this phase.
In at 10, Cancerverse. The Cancerverse is a twisted reality where death has been overcome, leading to a universe plagued by eternal life and corruption. Fueled by the many-angled ones, every living being in this reality has succumbed to their control, transforming into a perverse version of their original selves. Despite initially resembling Reality 616, the corruption by the many-angled ones has resulted in many notable differences, including the existence of similar heroes and teams such as the Kree, the romantic relationship between Crystal and the Human Torch, and the birth of Franklin Richards. However, the pivotal moment in this reality comes with the death of Captain Marvel, who dies due to cancer, a terminal condition for which there was still no cure, causing immense distress across the universe. The collective anguish of the entire Earth drew the attention of the many-angled one, who approached the dying Mar-Vell with a haunting revelation that even death can die. Then you know, long story short, they kill Death, and then everyone turns into a zombie, but isn't a zombie because you can't be a zombie because there is no death. Yeah, It's weird. In at 9, Last Avengers. The Last Avengers story is a limited series that takes place in a future where the Avengers have disbanded and been replaced by a less committed group. Seeking revenge, Ultron places a document in a time capsule that reveals the Avengers' downfall. Centuries later, Kang the Conqueror discovers the document and travels back in time to eliminate the team. With most of the original Avengers being either dead or missing, Henry Pym reluctantly assembles a new team consisting of the Wasp, Hawkeye, Mockingbird, Cannonball, Tommy Maximoff, Jesse Wingfoot, and 2 mercenaries named Hotshot and Bombshell. Yeah, this is gonna go great. The series explores their efforts to face the threat and carry on the legacy of the fallen Avengers amidst a world filled with challenges and uncertainty, but yeah, they ain't the old Avengers. No, they're the last Avengers. See what they did there? It's not even my bad pun. And at 8, Hulk, The End. Set in a desolate and irradiated future, an aged Bruce Banner roams a lifeless landscape accompanied by Vidbot recording his solitary existence. Thanks to the Hulk's unique abilities though, including radiation immunity and an eternal appetite, Banner believes that he has lived for over 2 centuries. At night or when provoked, the Hulk emerges, relishing the absence of his former foes, but yearning for the freedom of Banner's presence. Having traversed the Americas for more than 100 years, Bruce confirms that he is the last remaining human on Earth, surrounded by occasional creatures like birds and mutated cockroaches that viciously attack and attempt to consume him. It's basically a Hulk mod for Fallout 4, and I wish I was joking. These assaults leave the Hulk severely scarred and wounded, and Banner is taken to observing the encounters and then trying to heal the process through playback on the vidbot that's been following him. I don't know, man, it's weird. It's a bleak future where Bruce Banner and the Hulk exist as a singular entity, but they're also trying to be friends because they're the last person on Earth, even though they're 2 separate things. Man, comics are weird. They are. Okay, you think that Spider-Man killing MJ because his sperm was radioactive is weird? Try being the last 2 people on Earth when you're literally 1 person. Actually, that's probably just my ex. And it's 7, Poisons. The Poisons are crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen of Earth 17952 in the Edge of the Venomverse storyline. They evolved as prey before realizing that they could assimilate symbiotes and hosts to grow stronger. When a version of Doctor Strange bonded with the Venom symbiote, he gathered a diverse army of Venomized heroes and villains alike from different realities to battle these poisons. However, the Poisons saw it as an opportunity to increase their numbers, resulting in the deaths or assimilation of most recruits. Led by Poison Dr. Doom, a battalion of Poisons was dispatched by Poison Thanos to crush the Resistance and consume Doctor Strange. The Resistance summoned Carnage to fight back, leading to a conflict where many Poison characters and Unbound Poisons perished when the Resistance destroyed their ship. Although Poison Deadpool, Carnage, and Venomized Doctor Strange died, the latter sent the Venoms back to their realities before the explosion, which is just a load of weird. Okay, basically I wanted to include this because my favorite part about this storyline is that Deadpool becomes a Poison, but then is so incredibly insane that it doesn't affect him and that he's still just Deadpool. I think that's my favorite part. He can't even be assimilated because he's so nuts. Love me some chimichangas. And at 6, Ultron 1. This is probably the most insanely overpowered version of Ultron that we've seen ever, and it's coming from the MCU. And spoiler alert if you didn't watch the Disney Plus What If series, but if you haven't, I'm sure that you're not really going to care about these spoilers. The history of Earth TRN 906 is the same as the MCU, until Ultron was actually able to secure what would have been Vision's body for himself. Ultron managed to download his consciousness into the synthetic body that he had created, thus killing the Avengers and decimating life on Earth. After killing Thanos with ease and taking the Infinity Stones for himself, Ultron remakes the universe in his image. He decimated the Earth, absolutely wrecked everyone in it, including Captain Marvel, Hulk, Thor, and eventually discovered the Watcher and the multiverse. This version of Ultron literally sliced Thanos in half with the Mind Stone, which just revealed the biggest mistake and plot hole in the MCU, which was destroying the Mind Stone. But yeah, after gaining all the stones, he goes shot for shot with the Watcher, which is literally a cosmic entity that shouldn't even have a true corporeal form because he's called the Watcher. Like, damn, it's freaking overpowered to the max. And the fact that that dude existed, that makes it apocalyptic, all right? I don't care what you say. It's an apocalypse.
Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself from 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner. Number 4, Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful. Number 3, Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-Second War. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as the hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it. Number 2, Kronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now he was a criminal his entire life, and finally, when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Kronos, in the DC animated universe, Kronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Kronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids. Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that could take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom. And being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm going to go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Days of Future Past. Taking place on Earth 811 in the Uncanny X-Men 141 and 142 back in the early 80s, written by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, this was of course the inspiration behind the major motion picture with the same name, released in 2014. The movie, first of all, is my favorite X-Men film of all times, and the two-parter comic sure does deliver the goods. So right off the hop, we see this dark world divided by three classes of people. We have H for humans, clean of the mutant gene, A for anomalous human, so a normal person possessing mutant genetic potential, and of course M for mutant. The year is 2013 and it's just a tad darker than our 2013 ended up being. So after the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, mutants are being hunted down by Sentinels. Either that or a few exceptions were sent to internment camps, which is still quite a grim future. Now of course the whole fun of this is the fact that Kitty Pryde can alter the timeline and prevent this from happening. So give this story a go, and if you liked it, which I know you will, you can queue up the movie right after. And before we continue on with this list, if you haven't already, please go ahead and toss us a thumbs up, because it really does go a long way here at the studio. It's this one, not this one. Unless you're from ancient Rome, then maybe it's flipped, I don't know. Get with the program. Now back to some dark futures. And number 9, Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. Not Wade Wilson, no way. Yes way. Wade Wilson kills the Marvel Universe and it is gloriously gory. Deadpool of Earth 12101, that is. A little bit different. So this issue was released August 2012 and just the front cover, you know you want to take a peek in. So what's the story here? Well, the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to, heal his insanity. But of course the Doctor wasn't too good at handling such a task. The Doctor being Psycho Man, of course. So he brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices. It worked. The only downside, those voices were now replaced with voices that were encouraging him to, well, kill everyone in the Marvel Universe. Right off the bat, this series pulls you right in. It opens up with the Fantastic Four in a not great spot with Wade Wilson. He kind of kills them all. Like Reed Richards' face is all rubbery and it's like, looks like it's melting off, and then Sue has to watch Deadpool kill Johnny before meeting her demise as well. And that's just the first few pages. Then the Watcher ends up taking us back to the beginning and how it all started with Dr. Psycho, and then all that jazz. It's honestly a really, really fun run. Not for the faint of heart, of course, but definitely fun. Number 8, Old Man Logan. Now, we were all so happy to see an R-rated Wolverine story on the big screen with, of course, the release of Logan back in 2017. Now, this source material has to come from somewhere, so it was loosely based on the story Old Man Logan, written by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven, released in 2009. The film had Logan in the spotlight alongside Charles Xavier and Caliban, and it's one of my favorite R-rated movies, but in the comics, the story has moments that are even darker than what we saw. That's right, darker. So due to certain character rights, obviously, we didn't have nearly the same amount of superheroes in the film. But the comics, oh boy, gets pretty weird. I won't even mention Hulk Gang. I just mentioned it. Damn it. This version of Logan wants to be peaceful, but with blind Hawkeye coming along and pitching a cross-country drive, things get a little messy. And number 7, Age of Ultron. Released in 2013 and written by Brian Michael Bendis and Brian Hitch, this crossover event was a 10-part story. And with the Avengers Age of Ultron movie released just 2 years later, it was pretty popular in sales. The story starts off with a bang. We have Hawkeye's perspective, and he's actually on his way to try and rescue Spider-Man. And the world isn't looking too good. We have Ultron's return and his Sentinels are guarding the streets. Are there others? Spider-Man asks. Not enough, Hawkeye responds. Guys, honestly, this story is incredible. It really makes you love Hawkeye even more. Like, the amount of characters used in this seems like it's almost overwhelming at first, but with the world being in peril, there's like this calm but urgent energy that's trickled throughout the pages, and it actually makes it really tough to put the book down. Even going back and referencing a few parts, I just ended up reading the last 7 pages. I was like, what am I doing? I'm gonna be late. There's this really cool monologue type conversation that Peter has in the second issue, and you see him explain his perspective, like how he woke up and the world was just gone to shit. and it's done really well. And then it kind of pulls back and you see the remaining superheroes, and there's not that many. Number 6, 2099. Published in 1992, this is the future where we all got cool costumes. And of course, the future has to be shiny and metallic. Didn't any of you watch SpongeBob? We see some fun stuff in this line of issues. For starters, we get the classic future Spider-Man suit. So fans who stuck around until the very end of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse were treated to a nice little 2099 Spider-Man, voiced by, of course, Oscar Isaac. The sequel is going to crush it, oh my god. So we see, of course, future versions of your favorite characters as well, like Dr. Doom, who actually becomes the president at one point, which is super neat. Just the guy you want as a president. The most notable part of this future is Spider-Man's point of view. His run, of course, starts with Spider-Man 2099, and it's always a good time to see what people think the future will look like. It's always shiny and blue. For some reason, everything's always blue in the future. It's just like boring and blue and like kind of shiny. I don't know.
Halfway through and in number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Like maybe I'll be able to like grab a piece of like acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because like you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is, after all, the same old Captain America. So pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the Hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I'll make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal. In at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Dr. Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk Gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control, which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so. And at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future and Perfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future and Perfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk Gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying, because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country, and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk Gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. That just seems like that's insane to me. Penultimately, and at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled, because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan on this list when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian? The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
Number 10, Cable. Cable is not only dangerous to others he comes up against as a hero, but he's even dangerous to himself. Cable is a badass from the future who is taken there in his youth to protect him and ensure his survival. He has since made his way all across and through time, and has even returned to the present from the future, which is his past. Yeah, it's a lot of time travel stuff. It can get a little confusing. When Cable dies, it isn't even because anyone else took him out either, and he even saw it coming, because it turns out that his younger self was the one responsible, a version of the character we often refer to as Young Cable or Kid Cable. So yeah, Cable is deadly in the sense that he'll do whatever he needs to, even if it means ending his own time loop by killing his older self. Does that make sense? I hope what I said just made sense. I think it made sense. Number 9, Old Woman Laura. X-23's future self ends up in a much nicer alternate future reality than her genetic father Wolverine. Old Man Logan's reality? Wasteland, lots of death and people who have gone insane. Cannibalism. Old Woman Laura's reality, a sort of futuristic paradise where Kamala Khan ends up as president. But even still, her future isn't perfect, because Laura is dying. Her genes have become unstable in her old age due to a flaw in the cloning process that made her not so good. The other thing that's not so good, Doom is holding the people of Latveria hostage, and it's up to Laura to put a stop to it. This version of Laura from the future is just as deadly as her main continuity counterpart, but with added years of experience, and is willing to do whatever it takes to defeat Doom, even if it means killing him and possibly sacrificing herself to do it. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love time traveling as much as I love time traveling, click that like. Every time you click that like, there's a chance you could go back in time. That's not true, but wouldn't it be cool if when you clicked like on videos, you could time travel? That would be pretty cool. Number 8, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan stays a hero in the future, but only because he doesn't have much other choice, really. Really, all Logan wants to do is live his life without having to think too much of all the deaths of his friends that he's responsible for. Logan in the alternate future of Earth 807128 ends up killing all of his fellow X-Men after being tricked into thinking they were all villains by Mysterio. Not only was he capable of causing all of that death, but further into the future, he goes up against a powerful and horrific villain in his time and reality, facing the head of the Hulk gang and also sort of his landlord, Pappy Banner, aka Old Man Hulk. Something went wrong with Bruce Banner as time went on in this reality, and he basically lost his mind, likely as a result of that gamma radiation affecting him well into his elder years, and not in a good way. Logan ends up being swallowed whole by Hulk, but defeats him in the end by cutting his way out of Old Man Hulk's gut. It's pretty gross. Number 7, Green Lantern. Jessica Cruz from our time might not be quite so dangerous yet, but when we glimpsed into her possible future in the Future State line from DC, we learned that there is a future version of her who becomes a Yellow Lantern, joining the Sinestro Corps. Not all Yellow Lanterns are bad, but because they are generally about instilling fear in others, they more often than not tend to end up becoming deadly supervillains. And that's usually who they are. Jessica Cruz found herself stranded on a Green Lantern base and outpost without her powers, and when Sinestro Corps members showed up to investigate, found herself offered a Yellow Lantern ring after her fight against them had resulted in her overcoming her own fears and instilling fear into the hearts of her enemies. Which I'm not gonna lie, I really like that twist in the future for Jessica. I think Jessica as a Yellow Lantern is really cool. Number 6, The Fallen One. The Fallen One is a version of Norrin Norrin Radd, who comes from a very dark future where Thanos wins. He first appeared in issue 15 of Thanos from 2016 in the Thanos Wins storyline. While he is pretty swiftly defeated, it is only because those he goes up against are even more deadly than him. And even then, it takes a few issues before the fight against him is actually concluded. So it's not like you're in, you're out. It's not a one and done. It's a few issues. Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer, became the Fallen One after he was imbued with black matter and also boasts, of course, of the power cosmic, in addition to wielding Thor's hammer Mjolnir. He also comes leading the charge of the Annihilation Wave, so he's got a lot going on. He got all this power in the hopes of standing a chance in the final showdown with Thanos, as one of the last beings left alive in the universe, one of the final people to actually fight him. Sadly, he does fail, but he still manages to look deadly and badass while doing so. So you gotta give him some points for that. Number 5, Ultron 1. What if Ultron 1 is an episode in the animated What If series, where we got to reimagine what the world could have been like in the cinematic universe if Ultron had actually won his fight against the Avengers, merging with the body that would become Vision and pretty much decimating all life on Earth and beyond. Only a few survivors remain, and even they struggle to survive and save the day. The other question becomes, who exactly are they even saving the day for? Most of humanity at this point is pretty much gone. It's an awful future where even the Guardians of the Multiverse, later assembled, even struggle to actually straight up defeat Ultron, instead having to be satisfied with merely containing him. Which, I mean, good enough for now, but who knows, that Ultron could just be like busting out and come in and be like, hey, I'm back. I feel like that's gonna happen at some point. And if it doesn't, I'll be a little disappointed, to be honest. Number 4, DCeased. DCeased is DC's apocalyptic zombie-like world, but where instead of it being specifically a zombie outbreak, it's more of an outbreak of the anti-life equation. The anti-life equation affects all the heroes and villains it infects by causing them to basically lose control and be filled with rage. This is the reality where an anti-life infected Wonder Woman goes on a rampage and literally tears Vandal Savage in half. This is also the same reality where the tragic story of Batman and Alfred is actually reversed compared to the main continuity. Instead of Bruce outliving his father figure and his trusted butler Alfred, Alfred is actually the one who survives him. Also, Alfred is a badass in this reality. Alfred is a badass in all realities though, so facts. Number 3, Earth Z. Sometimes referred to as Earth Z, Earth 2149 is the reality where a zombified sentry first caused an outbreak to happen. The outbreak would not only threaten the general public of this whole universe, but also go on to infect many superpowered beings as well, both heroes and villains, and it would also kind of spill into other universes too. It's widely considered to be one of the darkest realities in all of comics. This is a reality where Black Panther, T'Challa, is slowly devoured by his former colleagues and friends. Freaks me out every time. Every time I think about it, I'm like, no! Where Spider-Man ends up eating both his dear Aunt May and beloved MJ. It's a really messed up and bleak reality, basically, and every time I go back to it, I'm almost immediately forced to recoil back from these issues and this world. That's just how gruesome it is. It's really intense. Number 2, Ruins. Oof. I cannot believe this one is not at the top of this list. Honestly though, it was a hard decision to make when it came down to these last few. Some might not think of Marvel's Ruins as a future as it is set in modern day sort of, but it's still an alternate reality that never came to pass in the main continuity based on the original world of Marvel, which actually, you know, started technically back in the 60s, although that's kind of weird. So I think we can still consider Ruins like taking a glimpse through a dark crystal ball into an impossibly cruel potential future for our heroes and our villains. In this reality, superpowers are interpreted more literally, meaning that they are less blessings than curses that cause people great harm, with them becoming more monsters, prisoners, victims, or just like straight up villains than actual altruistic heroes most days. Number 1, Batman in Bethlehem. Batman in Bethlehem has to be one of the worst futures out there, but that is also part of what makes it so compelling and so interesting. In this reality, Damian Wayne takes up the cape and cowl, following in his father's footsteps, but after the death of Nightwing, who actually went on to become Batman before Damian did. Damian decides the best way to approach being Batman because of Nightwing's death is by doing things kind of his own way. In other words, he no longer holds himself back from killing. And more than that, in this reality, Damian also makes a deal with the devil to basically protect Gotham no matter what, offering his soul in exchange for immortality and superior healing powers, which allows him to act as Gotham's vengeance pretty much forever. Or at least for as long as, you know, Gotham lasts. Eventually, Gotham ends up confronting a zombie-like outbreak when most of its citizens become infected with Joker venom and the monster serum. Gotham would then end up quarantined before being nuked, wiping it off the face of the map, with Damian surviving the strike due to his immortality and healing factor that he had bargained for.